Hi everyone, my name is Yvonne Villarreal and I'm a reporter here at the LA Times, and I'm joined today by Times TV critic Mary McNamara. And on today's edition of Talking TV, we're going to be talking about sex, or rather Masters of Sex, which is the Showtime drama that tells the story of William Masters and Virginia Johnson, the pioneering sex researchers. Thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here. Always happy to talk about sex.
Always. Yeah, we talk a lot about sex downstairs, don't we, Mary?
Yes, we do.
It's the topic of conversation all the time. Never weird.
No,
we were just talking about sex up here, too. Anyway. So we're 4 episodes into the 2nd season of Masters of Sex. How are you feeling so far?
Well, it's interesting because the 2nd season hasn't had very much sex.
Yeah.
I mean, the 1st season was all sex all the time and weird sex and, you know, I don't even know if I can say the words, but the contraptions that they use, the microscopic thing and the, you know, and they're all having sex with their little things attached to them in the you know, examination room with the stirrups still present. And so it was a very weird experience. And I remember when I talked to the creator, I said, you know, I would love to know how people watch this show, because I only could watch it by myself.
Yes.
Because the sex was so weird and uncomfortable that was like well, obviously you're not going to watch it with your kids, but you're not going to watch it even with friends or even with my husband. It was kind of like a personal kind of thing.
Well, and when I watched, I mean, I live in an apartment with like out AC, and I remember it was like summer, and I would I have to have the windows open because I will die in my apartment. But it's like when I watch this show, I like always made sure to close the windows because I don't want people to think I'm like having a porn marathon in my apartment.
Even when you talk about it, I was talking about it to somebody, and my daughter was there and like, you just said sex, and I'm like, well, I have to because that's the title of the show. But the 2nd season is, you know, having established what the research is, and also, you know, in the narrative of the story at the end when Bill Masters presented his findings, of course, everybody was shocked and horrified, and he got basically kicked out of the college where he was originally working. And so then we had a couple of episodes where he didn't have a job, and so the study was not continuing. I mean, it was continuing a bit between him and Virginia, and we were sort of, you know, that line between what is research and what is an affair, that was kind of being discussed. But this season so far has been much more about the emotions, about the psychology of the people involved, and so it's a very different kind of show right now. I mean, I'm assuming, because I think they are going to get a new hospital and start doing. So last Sunday they had a really good scene. You know, he had moved to the new hospital, and the guy who had brought him into the hospital definitely had this leering sensibility towards the study, and in fact brought a whole bunch of guys in to watch a woman while she was masturbating, and they were like eating Chinese food, and like they were at a stag film or something, and he, you know, had a meltdown and punched the guy out, and so that was kind of cool.
That was kind of cool.
It was good to see him because, you know, he went. You know,
let's talk about this, because you were not happy with the 1st season in terms of his character and not being likable, which is something he strived for. I know when I talked to him, he fought hard to make sure that this character wasn't likable. So talk about your issues with that.
Well, he was very, you know, buttoned down. I mean, he was supposed to be this really controlled, like very repressed. And so, you know, the contrast between here's this man, the way he presents to the world, and the work that he's doing, and that he is, you know, he was scientifically interested in sex, but he and his wife had issues. They weren't having sex, and when you saw them have sex, it was painful to watch because it was very perfunctory. And so then when he, you know, starts participating in the study himself with Virginia, you see like this passion, and then he doesn't know what to do with it. But I did have a hard time because, you know, Lizzie Kaplan as Virginia Masters was the heart of the show in the 1st season, and she was so beautiful and so amazing. But she's supposed to be falling in love with him, and like I sort of had a hard time because it's like, you know, beyond the fact that you're having sex with him on like a weekly basis, I couldn't really get what it was that she saw in him. But then this season we've seen Bill like sort of relax. We saw him last
in the fight,
not this past the Sunday before. There was a big, very dramatic encounter between the two of them, in which he talked about having an abusive father, and they sort of came to terms, well, not really came to terms, but they sort of negotiated what this really was, even though they didn't have a resolution. But so you do now see him more as a human. And even as he's dealing with just everybody in the show, he's much more relaxed and much more likable. And it also was, I love Michael Sheen. But in almost every performance, he always had that twinkle in his eye, and he didn't have it. And so some of it was a disconnect between the performer and the character. I kept waiting for that to come through. But, obviously this is not who William Masters was. And so he was very buttoned down. So it is nice to see him kind of be a little more human.
Let's talk a little bit more about the relationship between Bill and Virginia, because the show sort of explores love, sex, and intimacy, and not all the times do those come in a package together.
Very rarely.
Yeah, very rarely. Yeah. And so what seemed to be lacking with them, I mean, they have the sex part, and there seems to be like that bit of love, even though maybe Bill wouldn't even call it that. But the intimacy was lacking maybe until the fight episode. What do you make of how this show explores this? Because we also see it in the relationship between Beau Bridges' character and Allison Janney. Like they have this deep-rooted love, but maybe
it is really interesting that it is like it's almost as if even though the show is very much about sex, it's like sex has been removed or put in a different box from love and intimacy and all that. And so you see with Allison Janney and Beau Bridges, he was a closeted gay man and coming to terms with that, and she just thought he didn't, wasn't attracted to her, and then she had an affair and realized she was attractive, and that was really wonderful. And I have missed them in the second season. We saw them in early episodes, and then the Beau Bridges character tried to hang himself, and now they're off, like sort of dealing with that, and I'm hoping they come back because they are so wonderful.
They need a spin-off.
They do need a spin-off. That would be wonderful. But yes, I mean, it is really interesting. I mean, the first season ended with Bill showing up on her doorstep in the rain, saying, I can do without anything, but I can't do without you. But they still haven't had like that kind of come to Jesus talk about, I love you, and this is more than just us researching. And so but that is where we're building, because of course they did get married in real life. So it's just kind of how long the show is going to take to catch up to that. But no, I mean, I think it is really fascinating, this idea of, the different aspects that you can really deeply love somebody, and even like the marriage between the Allison Janney character and the Beau Bridges character worked on a lot of levels, and they really were their primary person. They just didn't have the sexual connection. And so now you have almost the mirror opposite of that, which is that Bill and Virginia are also their primary purpose. They do have sex, but they haven't, the love part is not there. So it is, it's like kind of pulling it all apart.
Well, and how does Libby fit into all of this? I mean, we've she's been the sympathetic character like in the first season largely, and little by little in the second season we're seeing, I mean, with the Coral character played by Keke Palmer, we're seeing this side of Libby that's kind of like, you're kind of a racist, but
and you're also a frustrated mother and homemaker. And so she had the baby. I mean, it is really interesting because just sort of narratively speaking, you have to make the wife you can't have her be wonderful because Bill is cheating on her. And so then how do you, as a viewer, reconcile that? So I don't know what the original Mrs. Masters was like in real life, but they sort of have, she's become colder, she's become very controlling about the way the household is run, she's become very demanding of Bill, and so you're sort of seeing him look and go, my marriage isn't perfect. It's not even not perfect because we're not having the greatest sex in the world. It's also not perfect because my wife is so clearly unhappy and kind of angry. But I also kind of feel bad because it's like kind of what they did to January Jones in Mad Men, which is like you make this wife seem so kind of mean so that you can still feel sympathetic for her philandering husband. And it's not, it's not really, and in cases of, if this were real life, it's not that cut and dry, and but that's the nature of television too. But yeah, she's been really abusive to her new nanny, and so we had, the lice episode.
Can we Viewers, I'm trying to do you a favor here. Can you reenact your reaction to the lice storyline?
Well, so in the story, she has this baby, and the baby, they discovered that the baby has lice, and then she of course blames the Keke Palmer character. But
and Mary has to watch a lot of TV.
I watch a lot of TV.
So sometimes she gets tired.
And I also have kids, and so I know from lice. So I'm laying on the sofa, and when they say, oh, the baby has lice, I lift up and I go, babies don't get lice. And that really bothered me, because infant hair, I mean, they don't. I mean, I guess they do, but you would have to be so vermin ridden for an infant to have lice. But it was just kind of that really bothered me. Mm-hmm. And also, like, it's the child has basically no hair.
But
that really bothered
that aside, let's talk about how that progressed. And we see Coral, Keke Palmer, have to do that scene where Libby demands
that she wash
the hair.
Yeah, I thought that was, what I loved about that scene. I mean, first of all, it goes to establish how controlling and weird Libby is getting. But also, I love the bit where she said, she promises Libby she's going to wash her, and then she comes back and she hasn't, and she says, I don't have lice. My brother checked me. I don't have lice. And also it cost me $4 to get her hair is straightened. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so I really love that it was like, you're asking me to do something that is, I'm going to have to then pay basically what is probably like 2 weeks of her salary to reset my hair, and it's like.
But that also drove that scene where Bill supports her in this, drove Libby mad, because here's a man who she can't get to pay attention to anything she does, can't pay attention to their son. And he's like showing validation to this nanny.
Right, and he makes a little comment like in this very scientific that black people don't get lice because of their hair. And I'm sitting here, is that right?
Right.
So that was really interesting. But it's because, I can't remember the name of Keke's character.
Coral.
But Coral. Mm-hmm. And she's really nice, and she's very loving with the baby, whereas Libby is being like, very controlling, and he will go down for the nap, and I'm not going to pick him up, and, all of that stuff. And so you do sort of see that coldness creeping in, and that, that Coral really, because she's a very warm character, and also Libby keeps correcting her, how she says asks, because she says acts, and she keeps correcting it, and it's, I love the Coral's expression every time she does it. It's like, you know.
Well, and this is all leading to something, obviously. I mean, we've seen how powerfully the show covers homosexuality in the 50s through Bo Bridges' character. And now we saw at the end of the episode that, Bill is going to be working at a black hospital. Yes. And all this stuff that we've been seeing with Libby and Coral is obviously going to lead to something bigger down the road, and we're going to be exploring race.
Right.
Talk a little bit about what you maybe hope to see that we haven't seen, like maybe on how Mad Men covers race or something.
Well, to a certain extent, they're doing a little bit of what Mad Men, because Mad Men had a much bigger cast, has a much bigger cast, and has all these different subplots. And really, there's, the Masters and Johnson story, and then there are a couple of little subplots in this one. But they are using, and I think they're doing it more effectively this season, or not more effectively, but in a broader way. Last season, you sort of used the fact that Bill Masters and his wife are having problems with sex, the homosexuality issue, to show the need for this kind of research, and also to show like how ignorant even educated Americans were about sex, how repressed even liberal-ish Americans were about sex. And in this season so far, we had the wonderful the trans, well, he wasn't, it was an intersex baby. It was a baby born with 2 sets of genitals, and just a harrowing, where Bill was saying, okay, that we tested this baby chromosomally, this is a boy, and so we will, you'll have to do the surgery later, and the father just going, it's easier, just cut it off, and we'll raise him as a boy or as a girl. And Bill Masters just like losing it, because it's like, this is a boy, and now you're going to be raising a boy as a girl. And that was, these are issues that we are just now, with the gay rights movement and the transgender movement, it's like that we're just now dealing with, 20, 30 years after this. But so I think that they're doing a really good job of presenting all, I remember when Masters and Johnson, I was young, and like they would mention Masters and Johnson on Laugh-In, and it was like, it became almost like a tagline for anything that was, really sexual, but how important this research was, that they're really, and that how many, social changes that we are seeing now began because, these people were willing to do this very strange and alienated kind of research. So I think they're doing a great job with that. So it's going to be interesting to see, that obviously they are going to deal with race, and so what they're going to do with that and how they're going to weave that into the study, because they've been very good about keeping it on the study. So I'm interested to see what's going to happen.
How about what we've seen in terms of how they tackle like women's roles in society? Like we see Virginia and we see Dr. DePaul like trying to, make headway in a man's world, and yet we see Libby like as the traditional version of what what the time was used to. And talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, and again, Mad Men did this better. They dealt with the female-male issue, and you could see very much feminism rising, and you're seeing that here too. But especially with Virginia, she comes in. She doesn't have a college degree. I don't think she certainly does not have a medical degree. But she is, was key to this study, not just because she was participating in it, because she understood things. She was able to make people comfortable. But then he took her off the study. He didn't list her name. And now she's been doing work with even the female doctor, and she's taking her off the study.
And she's selling diet pills too.
Exactly. And so you see how hard it was for women to be taken seriously, even when through whatever reason they were doing very important work, they were not getting the credit for it. And it's just, and also because she's an attractive woman, it's like that even works against her. It's like, oh, she's just a glorified secretary, and that you see her fighting for it. And it ended, this episode ended with her telling her daughter, you have to be able to do these things for yourself. You can't be just helping out somebody else and then just assuming that they will give you credit, because they won't. And so I think, that's something that we all struggle with still. I mean, and not just women now. It's, but yeah, seeing that progression of women being taken seriously, and you go, like, even when he presented his findings to the board or to his community, it was all men.
Right.
And the idea too of just taking women's sexuality seriously as something different from how women experience sex versus how men experience sex, that was like, what? It's the great mystery. We don't want to know.
Right.
We don't understand women, but we don't really want to, kind of thing.
Well, and this show is one that, has been a modest performer ratings-wise, but, critics love it. What do you think what's the issue there? Why aren't more people maybe tuning in?
I think, well, I mean,
it does good on replay, but...
Right. Well, it's a very smart show. It's a, kind of a slow-moving, very character-driven show. It's a pay-attention show. I think because when Mad Men started, we had never seen anything like it. And the period and the beauty and the high production value and all that, everybody was just riveted. We're a little more used to it now, and the period and it's all the same. I mean, Master of Sex, beautifully shot, wonderful attention to detail, the clothes and all of that stuff. But we're a little spoiled now because we have a lot of shows that are doing that, and so so they had to create their own wave. And the way they have dealt with the sex, which I really take my hat off to them. Because that's, the legitimate way that this study proceeded. Right. It's not erotic. Right. It's not something, it's not tittillating. Right. It's uncomfortable at times to watch. And so I think that, you didn't have, this was not something that people would tune into, it's not like comfort food. It's like you actually, and because they are raising all of these issues that are still, people are uncomfortable with. People are still uncomfortable with sexuality. They're uncomfortable with, the many, unbelievable array of sexuality that there are. I mean, they're doing now in the narrative of the story, they're postmenopausal women, older people, and people are laughing about it within the show, but that's still something that we as a society don't quite know how to talk about. And, masturbation, which you see more on TV, but it's almost a joke, but this is taking it more seriously and putting it on the spectrum of sexuality. So I think that it's actually one of those shows that deals with, these are not historical issues. These are very, prevalent issues that we're not necessarily, comfortable with.
Right.
So it's not an easy, you know what I mean? It's not like one where you just sort of, even though I was laying down when the lights came up, it's like one where you actually have to pay. It makes you think, and it makes you think a lot, and it makes you think about your own life, and that, that's hard.
We should watch an episode at the next TV meeting just to make everyone uncomfortable. The Emmys are coming up in a few weeks, and Lizzie Kaplan's up for lead actress.
Yes.
Want to get your thoughts on that?
And she's amazing.
But also Michael Sheen was not nominated, which a lot of people cried snub about.
You know what? It's those categories are so crowded. They're so crowded, and this is a new show. So I think that there's something to be said for, and we have a couple of the older shows. We have Breaking Bad and Mad Men. So I'm sure people are thinking, well, Michael Sheen will have his chance next year. When it's that crowded, you actually have to think about that. But I think Lizzie Kaplan was such a revelation, and probably the best new performance on television last season. And so I was really glad that she got nominated. And, Allison Janney was also, really great. I was sad Beau Bridges didn't get nominated. It's like, I think that it's, or did he get nominated?
I think he
did. Oh, sorry, Beau. I'm rooting for you. And
we'll have our fact checkers look that up, but I I think he did, yeah.
So sad.
Everyone's nominated.
Nominated. But yeah, I think it's, I think this show is here. This season looks to be just as strong, maybe even a little stronger, because you're getting away from that uncomfort, where it's like about the medical equipment. And so I think that, you'll see more people. I think people will come to it, more, and I think people will also catch up with it. And then, I think it's got legs. The show has legs, so I think it's got Emmy legs. So, I'm sure we'll see it next season too.
So we'll be tuning in this Sunday. I'm assuming we can talk more about sex downstairs.
Not that you need Masters of Sex to talk about sex on TV.
It just makes it fun, right?
But it does take it seriously.
Yes,
so that's good.
Seriously. Well, guys, thanks so much for joining us today. Hope you catch us next time.